Hello, in this video we talk about working with a sample and getting that on your Nord Electro 6 versus working with a program. So a sample has a different file suffix, or also known as a file extension in the world of computers. And in this case I'm working with a drum sample, a steel drum sample, and it has the NSMP3 extension. Now on your computer you might not actually see that because oftentimes computers are set up to hide this extension. In any case, you can get the information if you were to select on it and use Command I, or right click on it and get info if you're on a Mac. So that's here. And then when you do that, it should show you the full file name here, or at the very least it'll say Nord sample here under kind. It also has a nice picture here of the sample. Now if you're on Windows, you can right click and go to properties and get something similar. You may not get the icon, but you should at least see that it's a different type of extension. So NSMP3 stands for Nord sample. SMP is short for sample, and 3 is the version of that sample, which is compatible with the Nord Electro 6 and the Nord Stage 3. Now, just to clarify some things, a sample is the pre-recorded sound that you might get and use on a keyboard. Samples are optional, meaning not all sounds that you can load on your Nord are necessarily samples. In fact, most of them are programs, and a program may or may not include a sample. In the case of this particular demonstration, I'm working with strictly a sample for steel drums to enable people with either a Nord Stage 3 or Nord Electro to take advantage of that sample. But the key here, and what's often missed when it comes to working with these sounds, or maybe better said, what's often assumed that people understand, which most of them don't because it's just they don't have exposure to it, is that in order to work with a sample, you actually have to do some extra work in order to get that to work on your Nord keyboard. So the first part of this is, once you know you're working with a sample, you cannot use the program button and hope to see anything. For example, I might be tempted to do sound download, and then we do our normal browse for the file, we look for it on the desktop, but it's not illuminated, it's grayed out, and that's because a program is looking for a complete settings package indicating what the settings are for organ, piano, and synth. But in this case, it's just the sample, the pre-recorded sound, that only works in the synth. So in that case, we have to push this button instead and load this in the sample library. Now when I click Sound Download and do the exact same thing, browse for the file on my desktop, you'll see that it immediately becomes illuminated and available for loading. So let's do that now. Now the next question is where to put it. If you simply say Add to Bank, it'll put it in the next available empty slot. And that's what I would recommend, versus this, which is to replace the entire contents of a bank. In fact, you'd probably only want to do this if you were doing a massive switchover or potentially loading a group of sounds from a sound library. You can optionally look at this button where it shows you the details. This says one sample to download, and then you'll click download. And then it moves along here, and it will put it in the next available slot. Now, what I like to recommend to people is to click organize so that you can see exactly where it is relative to all the other sounds. So it's at 107, location 107. Now, the other thing I recommend once the sound is loaded, or once the sample is loaded, is go to your keyboard and locate an empty place to store it. This gives us a place to load the sample. And watch this. I'll double click the sample, and that will put the sample automatically for me in the empty sound, in the empty program. You see how it loaded steel drums here? So at this point, we're nearly done. All I need to do is, instead of having it called empty, and remember you have to save this or it won't be saved steel drums won't be associated with the program. So this is my final step. I'll just hold the shift button and push the store button so that we can store it as well as save it and give it a name. So I'll name this now. I'll call it steel drums. Hopefully there's not a sound in here already named that, because you can't have two sounds with the same name. Steel. There we go. And space, capital D, R, U, M, S. There we go. Steel drums. And we'll give it a category. Let's see. I'm looking for tuned percussion, which I think is a category on some of the other keyboards, but not on the Electro. So what I'll do, I think, is we'll just do user, because it is kind of a very unique sound and user-based. And then now it's still blinking because I've named it, but I haven't actually stored it yet. So now we'll store it, and now it's wondering where to put it. So store this new as steel drums in P22 is the location. And now I've done it. So when you audition this, you'll see that because it's a brand new empty sound, it's missing quite a few things. Most notably, the release time is way too short. So we'll have to add a little release here to make it sound a little bit more natural, like the steel drum is resonating in a room. That sounds pretty good. And then we will add some reverb, because it never hurts to add a little reverb. Optionally, you can add some EQ if you wanted to. And I think we're good to go. So, and I'll save it again here because I've made some tweaks to those effects. That's how you work with a sample versus a program. And yes, it is extra steps, but the advantage of working with samples is that they're more universally exchangeable. In other words, you could go to the Nord user forum, locate a sample that someone happened to use as part of a program for the Nord Stage 3, for example. You could download just the sample and at least incorporate part of that program on your Electro 6 by loading the sample. Now, the Nord Electro 6 really only can do one sample at a time, but this will at least get you started to understanding how to work with samples, because they are quite a bit different than programs. Programs, you just lock and load. You just load the program, you're done. With samples, you have to actually load the sample in an empty sound, save the sound, tweak it, because you're dealing with a raw recording, which gets you 80% there, but the other 20%, which is to adjust the release, the effects, and the reverb, and whatever other effects you want, that's the part that needs to have a little extra work, and then you have to save it and associate it with a program. Now, incidentally, if I go right back to the Nord Sound Manager and click on the program area here and filter for steel, the word steel, you'll see that now I have my own program that I just made, and it's completely based on the sample, which is that raw recording of a steel drum, but we've made it our own here. We just have a brand new program called Steel Drums. At this point forward, from this point forward, I should say, now I can go sound up. I don't have to worry about whether I'm on sample or not. I can just go to program and sound up, and that program will be transferred. Now, keep in mind, because this is a pre-recorded piece of data called a sample, if I do a sound, if I click on program and do sound up, it will transfer the settings, my effects and the name of it, but it won't transfer the sample. In order to transfer the program and the sample as a collective, I need to bundle upload. So bundling always includes the sample. Sound upload doesn't. Sound just includes the settings for the sound, which is like the name of the sound, the effects that you used, and the fact that it's pointing to one piano, one organ. All the organ settings are saved. But if you used a sample in your synth engine, then that sample can only be transferred as a collective if you use the bundle option. So those are some pro tips here, especially for Nord Electro owners and really anyone working with samples. But hopefully that clarifies a lot of the mystery behind some of the things that are happening here. And like I said, it's assumed when you go to the Nord user forum that if you're going to download a sample, I guess there's an assumption that people just expect you to know magically how to work with these samples. But the truth is, they're a little tricky, and it's not always easy to understand if you're working with a program versus a sample. So I think this video should help with that. Take care. Keep up the good work.